Alright guys, in the last video we created these cool dynamic charts that are also based on our table filters, which is actually really cool. So if I want to look at just in this table, just the U18 group, then beneath this chart will be based on the U18 group. And well, the benefit of doing this is number one, we can use slicers in our table and they'll control the charts. And also we can still continue to sort our table. For example, I just sorted it A to Z, or let's say I sort overall score from largest to smallest, and we still have these charts. And it changes the order. So if I were to go to the overall score here, oop, not the power score. Now it's sorted from largest to smallest based on how I sort my table. So this interaction is actually really dynamic. It's a really difficult thing to do, but we did it, so we don't have to worry about that. Now what we're going to do, I think since we have so many athletes in this data set, it may or may not be relevant to you, but to me, I want to know pretty much, let's just say the top three studs and the top three concerns, if you will, in any category. And in this video, we're going to go through organizing that. So in the last video, I split a column into two, so that way maybe we can display a rank and someone's name. Or a value in someone's name. It doesn't really matter. But let's just get a general overview of each of these graphs. And what we can maybe say is we can have highest, average, lowest. Then we might have top three studs. 1, 2, 3, and I'll just add in another one. Top three concerns. And maybe we'll get a list of players from this. So to get the highest of the metric that we select in values 1, we can use a simple equation that equals max, and that takes the maximum value. And our data lives in this graph data area, so I'm going to go here, and this is values 1. I'm just going to go down here, and values 1 is 1 decimal, where higher is kind of always better. That's important to know. And I'm just going to lock in these cells, get a maximum value, and I'm sure that as we go through this, we'll have to throw in some if statements because, for example, maybe if I select one player, I mean, it still works, but there'll be issues. So we have the highest value. I can just copy this, paste it down, and I apologize in advance because we're probably going to add some if errors and things like that into these statements. We can get the average value. I'll copy that, paste it down, and I can just switch this to get the minimum value. So now we kind of have our range of outcomes for this variable. Put that in the middle. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to remove the decimal points to be 1. So if I switch this to a different metric, CMJ, we should have our highest, average, and lowest. And this is exactly what I was talking about here. Some person didn't do the CMJ. I don't want the lowest value to be 0 because they didn't do it. I want it to be something greater than 0. So what I might say is, so there's a function called minifs, and I'll show you how to use that right now for newer versions. You can say minifs, so you want the minimum of this, comma, when this, comma, is, quote, greater than 0, quote, and I'll close that off and click enter, and now we have the new minimum. This formula only works in newer Excel versions. So now I'm going to do the workaround formula to this, which combines a min and an if statement. I thought I might as well do that because it's a quick thing to do. So I'm going to copy this formula and paste it, or maybe I'll just do it from scratch. So I'll go equals min, and I'll just do what we just, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. So I'll select this. This is our minimum value that we're looking for. And I'll go, I copied that, equals min of that. This is what we had before, and it's 0. And now what we can do, we can go if this, something in here, is greater than 0, comma, and we just copy this again over, paste it here. and the quote. So we're saying pretty much we want the minimum value of what's in here if what's in here, which is the same range, is greater than 0. And I'll click enter. And we should have the same thing, and we do. Now we might as well, I'm sure that I'll have to do something here also, but let's just add if errors because that's good practice. If error, comma, blank. If error, comma, blank. If error, comma, blank. And now what this does for us is because we have so many athletes, oops, I'll keep the old formula. So because we have so many athletes, is that we can quickly see, all right, the highest guys have somewhere around that CMJ height. And the lowest guys have somewhere around that CMJ height. And you can kind of quickly see who those athletes are. Now let's get into getting the top and bottom 3. And in my opinion, the best way to do this is to rank the people in 2 different ways. Just because of the maximum, using maximum and minimums, you have to use them differently in this context, and this is the most simple way to do it. So I'm going to go to my graph data. Oh, I have a lot of stuff in here. And as we've been doing, I'm just going to move a bunch of stuff over. So we can move these charts over. We actually don't need them. So I'm going to delete them for now. And then I'm going to move all this stuff over. This stuff is important for our charts, but it won't be affected if I move it. Now, we want a ranking for value 1, we want a ranking for value 2, and a ranking for value 3. And I want these rankings in 2 ways so that I can get top people and bottom people. And one thing we're going to have to do with this one, which I'll talk about in a little bit, our percent area, which generally represents asymmetries, is we're going to have to say that we're going to have to get an absolute value of this number. And it won't affect body fat because all the numbers are positive, but you'll want to know who's the most asymmetrical, regardless of minus or plus, regardless of direction, most likely. So that's the way that we're going to go about that. Anyways, so let's go rank. I'll say up rank 1, say down rank 1, up rank 2, down rank 2, I'll say absolute 3, and I'll say up rank 3, down rank 3, and I don't know. I just gave random names. This is just me, so I know what's going on here when I come back here. And there are a bunch of ways to rank values, but there's only one. In older versions of Excel, there's only one really good way to do it. If you don't want to have duplicate values as a ranking. For example, if 2 people get the same rank, they'll both be the same number, and that will potentially cause problems in our team dashboard if we wanted to have numbers 1, 2, and 3 right here, because you'd only see one name. But let's go. So let's do it this way. It's a little bit more complex than the traditional rank way, but we can go equals rank. We want to rank this number because this is up rank 1, our value for our first chart. This is for our first chart, comma, and $B, $44, colon, $B, $179. I just typed it in instead of selecting it, and I'm probably going to do that moving forward. You can see that our range is selected, and this has to be the same for everything. We always have to use the same range. The reason why my range is the size that it is because this is the maximum number of values that I would say could go into my table, even though it's way more than the maximum. But you should make your range the maximum number of potential values or entries that could go inside your table. So I want to rank that and 0 descending, and I can do that. Click enter. That means he's the 16th ranked. But to make this a dynamic thing where there aren't going to be duplicate rankings, for example, let me just drag this down for a second. I wonder if we're going to have any duplicates. See how these two are number 4? Well, we don't want that. We want, even if they have the same number, I want one to go after the other for this purpose. So, and you'll see why. If you try to do it this way, you'll see you'll run into problems if you keep on going through this. But the plus countifs B44 to $B, $44, that's important, comma, B44 again. And then I think we end that and do -1 maybe, that, and click enter. I think that's how, we'll see. And let's wrap this around an if error, just in case there are errors. So if there's an error with anything that's going on here, comma, let's make it blank, close it off, click enter. I'm just going to drag this all the way down here to, and now what we should see is, I'm going to remove this decimal point here, is we shouldn't, yeah, so now we have number 4 and number 5 instead of number 4 and number 4. And that's what we want, or that's what I want for this purpose. You may want it another way. It won't work well with what we're going to do. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it over. Oh, you know what I should do? Is I should lock in the B's here. I should lock in the column B's here. Click enter. That way, all right, I'll copy it, paste it over, and all I have to do now is change this number from 0 descending to 1. Oops. To 1 ascending. Click enter. This is just the opposite. So he's ranked 16th best or 34th worst. Maybe I said that right. For this metric. And I'm going to select both of these and I'll drag them all the way down. So you should see anyone, I think there are 50 athletes in the database, so anyone who's number 50 on one thing should be number 1 on the other, because it's just the inverse. So now let's copy this and let's paste it over for our rank number 2. And all we have to do here is we just change the B's to C's. Since there are so many B's, I'd prefer to do a find and replace. I'll do it. So the way that we do that, you can change each B to a C also, that would work. I'm selecting everything in here, find, replace. I want to replace $B with $C, and that's also why we're consistent, so we can do things like this, which is a lot less clicks. And I'll go to replace all, click OK. Now this is their rank for the second value, or for our second chart. I'll copy this, paste it here, and change the 0, so they're 42nd best, comma, 1, or 7th worst. Again, it's just a different way of putting it. So now what I can do is I can maybe copy this one again, and I'll paste it here. And now instead of looking at C, we're not going to look at D, we're going to look at L. That's why we created L. And I'll tell you why in a second. So I'm going to select that, go to replace. I'm going to replace $C with $L. Go to replace all, click OK. And we're not going to see anything, but I'm going to copy it and paste it over. And this changed the 0 to a 1 again. So we have best and worst ranks. Now, the reason why we take the absolute value here is because, or the reason why we want to rank off of this column and not this one is because if I were to rank a negative 20% would have a very different rank than a positive 20%, when in reality, we care about the direction of an asymmetry, but for a ranking purpose, we probably want to know, if we want to know like our top 3 concerns, we want to know the guys with the most drastic asymmetry or who are way outside the norm, which could be in a negative or positive direction. So depending on their limb dominance, whether they're better on their left or right. So first we're going to take the absolute value of this column, and it's a very simple formula, equals ABS, open parenthesis, and you just pick the number. So I want an absolute value of this, close the parenthesis, and click enter. And there we go. And I'm going to do an if error around this too. If error. If there's an error with this equation, comma, make it blank, just for consistency. And now, I didn't do one at a time because it's quicker, I'll drag all of them. So I'll select everything, go to the bottom right, select this crosshair here, and drag it all the way down. And now we should have all of our rankings set up. And the next step in our process, now that we have these rankings, is to go into our team dashboard and put these rankings here. And I guess what we could do now is just write numbers 1, 2, and 3, and write numbers 1, 2, and 3. But sometimes this doesn't work out great. I usually use a formula, like getting the minimum or maximum value in the ranking range. But let's start here and see how it goes. Now we need to use something called index and another equation called match on top of that to pull in the values for the number 1, 2, and 3 best and 1, 2, and 3 worst people. If we want the values here. I do, because I don't want these data labels here because I have a lot of people in my data set and it's too much for me to look at. So I just want to know, if I know the top 3 and the bottom 3, I know the general range of where the top and bottom people lie, and I know who those people are. So it makes things easy for me to digest. Okay, so we'll go equals index. Now, what do we want in this cell here? Well, I'll go to my graph data, the value for our first chart, because we're on our first chart. And I'll select everything here, which I might type in manually for now on. So I want something between B44 and B179, comma. Well, what do I want? Well, I need to match the row number of where this is to the rank of the person who's number 1. So I'm going to match. It's asking me for a lookup value. Go to my team dashboard, this number. So if you find this number, and let's just lock in the column so that I can paste it down. So wherever you find this number, whatever number is typed in there, in this list, which is H44, and I'm doing $, so lock this range in to 179. We're always going to use 44 to 179, comma, 0, and some parentheses, and click enter. Now this is the value, and this makes sense. It's our highest value, so our top 1 stud would have this value. And do if error. If there's an error with this equation, everything going on in here, comma, let's make it blank. And now I'm going to copy this formula that we have, paste it here, and paste it here. And those are our top 3 values. And now we can use this equation again to get the person. So I'm going to copy this equation that we have and paste it right in here. But now instead of looking for the value, remember the first part of this index argument is what we want in this cell, instead of what's in column B, which is, which is the values for chart 1, we want the thing that's in column A, which is the people's names. So let's change B44 to A and B179 to A179. And I'll click enter. And I can copy that and paste it down and paste it down. And now we have our top 3 people. And if I can't see it because there's so much stuff going on here, but maybe I'll condense the data set. Let's just look at U18s so I can actually see things. And now this will change. Pippi Longstocking has a long name. I have to make this wider just for that person. But we can see, where's 32? Up here, Walter White, and we can see Batman 31.7. Yep, there he is. and Pippi Longstocking 31.4, and there she is. And so we have it, and we don't need these values here in case we have a ton of people. We can use the axis, we can use these numbers in the top three, and we get a glimpse of everything that's going on. Now let's do the top three concerns, or the bottom three, the top three worst. It's another way to put them. I'm going to copy this formula that I have here and paste it right in there. Now the only difference is that instead of looking for the ranking in H44 to H179, which is our higher is better, or our lower ranks are better performers, we want to look in column I, which is the next one over for our worst performers, if you will. So I'm going to change H to I and H to I and click enter. Now that is our worst, that should be our worst value in this data set. And if we kind of look through it, it is. 20.3 is the lowest, and the person, Cosmo Kramer, should be the guy that we get here a little bit later on. So I'm going to copy this formula, paste it down, and paste it down because it's looking at, because it's dynamic and that it's looking at the row as it changes. And now we can do the same thing here. We copy the formula that we have, paste it over, and instead of looking at the value, which is in column B in our graph data, let's look at column A, which is the name of the person with that rank. And I'll click enter. And we get Cosmo Kramer. I'll copy it, paste it down, and paste it down. And those are our three biggest concerns, I guess. And we don't really have strict criteria. We could get crazy with this and have specific concerning criteria and stud-like criteria by setting arbitrary values or whatever, kind of like the stuff that we did prior for setting up scores, but not going to go through that now. I just want to show you now we have something that adds a little bit more value where we have we pick a metric, we get our studs, and we get our potential concerns, and I can get rid of these values. This is a condensed data set, and we could do it. It's all affected by our filters that we apply here. So now we're looking at everybody, and these values are the best for everybody. The only one issue that we're finding out now that we should have anticipated is that a top ranked value could be someone that didn't perform a test, like this person. Having a 0 inch or centimeter, it looks like it's in inches, 0 inch broad jump is not realistic. So we can assume that this person did not test. And we're not going to do anything about it for now because this might be a genuine concern for some people that someone didn't test. And now that we have this all done for one graph, we can just copy and paste it and do a couple of find and replaces to make things right for the other graphs. So I'm going to copy all this stuff that we've already done, and I'll paste it here. And what we're going to have to do now is, instead of looking at column B for the value, we're going to have to look in column C, because that is where our values for chart number 2 are. So that's the first thing that we're going to have to do. So let's highlight all this stuff. And let's replace B with C and replace all. There we go. Now we should see the values show up. And we can make them 2 decimal points because that's that's the purpose of this chart. These are times. And the next thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do something a little bit funky, and that's we're doing the opposite. Since lower is better now, we want the better ranks to be, for example, if we were, all right, so normally we would replace H with J and I with K. But because lower is better, we need to replace H with K and I with J because the ranks are inverted or inverse. So now let's do that. So we'll find replace H with K and I with J, enter. And now we see our top 3 and our bottom 3. And, you know, this 0 thing is a little bit frustrating, but it is what it is for now. She didn't test, and we could clean that up maybe in our raw data if we wanted to. But now we have the highest, average, lowest, and we might just change that. Since we know what each graph is about, like this is higher is better, we could say best, worst, and we could say, I mean, what we could do here is we could just kind of, I'm just going to drag these down. I'm going to drag these up. And I'm going to drag these up. And we can just say best, worst. And now we can copy and paste. It's probably easier to copy and paste this one over down here. So I'm going to copy this. Paste it here. And now, instead of looking at column C, which is here, we're looking at column D for our values. That's for our values, but for our ranking values, it's going to be different. And maybe for all of them, instead of D, we'll look at L to start, which is the absolute values of our percentages. So let's go with find replace. We're replacing C with, what did I say? L. Let's replace all. Now remember, these are the absolute values, and let's change these to percentages. Maybe one decimal. So the best is, again, the lowest if we want to say best. You can change these words to be whatever you want. The average is about 5.8% difference between limbs for Y balance, and the worst or the largest difference is 14.5. We can say lowest, highest. And here are the top 3 and bottom 3. Except now I'm a little bit confused. So if the highest value, oh yeah, we need to replace J and K with the other values. So we need to replace J with N. Oh, sorry, J with M and K with N. So that we're looking at the right rankings. So we'll replace J with M, and we'll replace K with N, and replace all. So now we have it, and this makes sense now. We can see that. Even though our lowest we say is 0.6, we said it has to be greater than 0. Maybe for this one, especially because you could have no asymmetry, is, whoops, we could just get the minimum value, but right now I guess I'll just leave it as is. I'm trying to think of a way when we're looking at the values, instead of looking at L for these values, we might be able to look at the actual values, which are in D. So let's try that. And we can actually do that with everything now that I think about it, as long as it's not based on the rankings. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to select all this stuff, and I'm going to replace L with D. So replace our absolute values to D with our raw values. And lowest and highest won't make sense anymore, but if I do it like that, yeah, so this one won't work. We don't want this one, but what we do want to show the raw values here, if you want to. So I just undid that, and I'll select all these so that we can actually see the direction of asymmetry also, which will make sense on our graph. And let's do that replace. So now when we're looking at a person, we should see Rachel Green minus 14.5, and this looks like a long one. Let's make it bigger so that we can actually see people's names. And Rachel Green is that 14.5 down here. And it just gives us a sense of the direction of the asymmetries within our team, although we still probably want these values to be absolute. And I guess the last piece of this is, maybe we make the charts a little bit smaller, like to fit the area that we have. Maybe the text is also a little bit smaller. Just so that we can read things. Maybe we don't even want these. Wow, that made these really small. Let's go 14 and bold. Sorry, I'm just changing. Let's go 14 and bold. And let's go 14 and bold. And let's make these graphs align with the space that we kind of have for them. We could always make them bigger and smaller. It's kind of up to us what we want to do here. And we can delete a bunch of rows if we want to. I'm actually thinking that these rows are actually thicker, so I'm actually going to take all these rows that we have here. Let's make it, let's see, 20. See how that looks. Now the rest of this stuff is just kind of visual. And I guess I'll just go through my initial visual strategy. Maybe I'll say chart comparison 1. Let's merge and center this. Maybe I'll make it that blue color and a white text. Make it centered. I'm going to make all these a little bit bigger words. Made it a 12 font. Maybe these areas are segregated somehow with some gray. And yeah, let's just move everything into the middle of the row. So I'm just going to select it all, move it into the middle horizontally. And the names maybe are left aligned. Maybe this is just a tad bit bigger. And yeah, maybe these are all, maybe the numbers are left aligned with all this stuff. And let's add this chart comparison thing. Let's add it here. And let's add it here. Comparison 3. Chart comparison 2. And then what I like to do is, so maybe I'll make this row height 10. This is before each chart comparison, and I'll delete the 2 rows before it. So I'll make the last one row height 10. Yeah, and that looks pretty good for now. Sorry, when I say that, I need to still copy this, and I'm going to select these 2 and right click and apply the formatting to them. And I will do this, copy that, and I will select that, that, and that, and right click and apply the formatting to those. And I will make the charts fill up the space. So let's do that. Let's bring this down here. Let's bring it up to the chart comparison, and let's bring this down here. And you could have fun with this, like if you wanted these to be green, like you might say, oh, the number 1 stud is, I don't know, is green. It happens to be the Hulk, and the number 1 concern is this person, and they happen to be Mystique. And you can play around with colors and stuff, and I actually might do that right now. Why not? Yeah, so I like using different. I'm looking at more colors here. Let's do this one for the green. I'm going to be systematic in my approach here. I'll apply that here, but maybe it's a little bit lighter, and then a third wave, or fill colors, maybe it's even lighter than that. Maybe this one actually has to be even darker so that I can. I'm just playing with. Yeah, I like playing around with colors sometimes. That's fine. Those are my top three, and then these will be my bottom three. Maybe this dark red, and then I'll copy this formatting, and I'll paste the formatting here. Right now there are too many colors with this light blue and stuff too, so for me at least, so let's make this a little bit lighter, and let's make the third one a little bit lighter than that. Okay, so yeah, there are too many colors going on here for me. So what I'll do is I'll copy this and I'll paste the formatting to these. Sorry, I'm going through this rather quickly because I don't know what I want. I'm just trying to give you ideas of maybe the way that you would want to look at it. And I'll paste the formatting there, and I will paste the same formatting there. And now I just have to kind of go back and make these into percentages again. And I need to go back in here and make these two decimals again. And there we have it. So now we have this full kind of fitness testing dashboard thing, and unfortunately we don't have anything to the right here, but that's okay because this is kind of, I don't foresee you printing off something like this. This is like more detail if you need it. That's why we have our scoring system. And then this is kind of a player by player breakdown in any fashion that you see fit. And it looks like I just I screwed something up here with this formatting. Sorry about that. Make that bold, bold, bold. And maybe this has a big box around it because you got to know about that. And yeah, right now I'm just screwing around with colors, but I want to make this something that kind of stands out. Maybe I will use that light blue line color for this box. And I'll copy that and I'll paste the formatting here. I'll paste the formatting here. We still should be able to navigate with it. And it looks good. All right, so thanks for joining me in this video. I hope it was helpful. And yeah, I don't know. I'll see you in the next one. Might get to the player part of this fitness testing regime soon.